Hello, I'm Justin Benson.
And I'm Justin Saborin.
And I'm Lone Vu.
We are candidates for the Master of Technology Management graduate degree at Wentworth Institute of Technology. In this presentation, we hope to highlight some of the key findings of our research into the failure of BlackBerry Limited, a Canadian-based smartphone device and software developer. We selected this company to analyze for failure for several reasons. First, BlackBerry, although not technically failed because they are still in business, has a long incubation period before a brief stint at great success within a market they essentially defined. However, as we'll discuss later, the success was short-lived as competitors quickly outpaced the company, leaving them relegated to a niche market of enterprises either too large to switch or those which require unique security compliance offered by the BlackBerry device line. For now, we're going to hold off on our bottom line statement for what caused this failure, but it is fair to set the tone by stating that BlackBerry unequivocally failed to innovate at the pace set by competitors and fueled by the consumer demand.
Taking a look at their history, the company was founded in 1984. Unlike companies of modern time which rapidly grow in investment and innovation through crowdfunding models like Kickstarter, BlackBerry existed for many years under the original name Research in Motion, or RIM. The Waterloo, Ontario-based company developed a niche line of products including two-way paging, which was popular with executives, construction workers, and healthcare providers who sought a way to access material when on the go. At the time, nobody else offered a comparable service in this area. When the original BlackBerry device produced by RIM was introduced, it offered a new flexibility. We all know what happened on September 11, 2001. This day, all cellular networks went down with the exception of RIM's. Emergency responders and even the White House were able to communicate using their BlackBerry devices. Shortly following the events of this day, the U.S. government ordered 3,000 phones due to its reliability. As you can imagine, this played a huge role in helping promote the brand to other companies and the public. Over the years, the number of subscribers increased, and in 2013 they saw their peak device subscribers at nearly 80 million, which is well illustrated on this adoption S-curve.
To understand what happened at BlackBerry, we will discuss the areas of leadership, finance and investment, product lifecycle management, operations and processes, marketing and communications, and human resource management. Each of these categories contribute to the problems that led to their decline in success and relevance. Despite the failures, there were a number of strengths of the company as we discovered by conducting a strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, also known as a SWOT analysis. In doing so, we've identified an understanding of enterprise requirements, baked-in security, and close integration with carriers and software vendor integrations as specific strengths. This is important to consider to avoid a jaded thought that the company had become completely devalued at the time of failure. On the opportunity side, a shift toward cloud infrastructure and the popularity of Google's Android operating system with developers should have been leveraged sooner as potential tactics to avert failure. The weaknesses and threats are covered in more depth as we move toward the presentation.
On the surface, it seems like a cheap answer to say that leadership was responsible for the failing of any company. I mean, how could they not be? The buck stops with them, so to speak. In BlackBerry's case, there is significant evidence into shortcomings of the management strategies that directly led to the eventual failure. For some time, the company used a relatively dysfunctional co-CEO model where Mike Lazarevic and Jim Balsillie were too involved in the operations and attempted to work in concert with each other to focus on supposed strength areas. However, our research found that employees cited confusion and disagreement between the two behind the scenes. One such example was that the target audience for the playbook, BlackBerry's attempt at a tablet computer in answer to the iPad. A theme you will follow through our analysis was the differing opinion between the need to target the device at consumers versus enterprise customers. The preferred model was to reach a consensus before moving forward. However, this led to a lack of accountability and no one was truly invested in the decisions that were made. Another area that wasn't adequately serviced by Balsillie and Lazarevic was growth planning and management of their human capital. When the company exploded into what we'll call mainstream success in the mid-2000s, a hiring boom followed and led to a large number of employees being onboarded but without clear direction on what they were or should be doing. This is due in part to the duo's historical hands-on approach and need to be actively involved in the facets of the business that would have been better off left to area experts. Finally, while they apparently discussing the direction approaches between each other, as evidenced by products such as the Playbook, it was also apparent that those decisions and reasoning did not flow downhill. Employees in several sources cited confusion on what they should be focused on, and again, the unclear division between consumer and enterprise focus.
In 1997, when BlackBerry held an initial public offering, they brought in $44 million in revenue, with the competitive edge of their physical keyboard and Office-on-the-go technology. They were able to stay ahead of their potential competitors, ultimately bringing revenue totaling $540 million in 1998. However, their failure to stay ahead by innovating, combined with stubbornness of not wanting to get rid of the traditional keyboard, has really hurt them financially. Between 2013 and 2015, their income statement showed a negative net income. To make the problem worse, they started 2014 with a $40 million loss. Some of the reasons are pretty obvious, like the number of subscribers have declined and the numbers of products being sold has also declined. Neither one of these statements is surprising since BlackBerry has failed to innovate beyond their original product line. Despite the company reducing operating expenses through cuts in marketing, research and development, and company-wide layoffs, they were not able to counteract their losses. This strategy was executed in a reactive fashion and not proactively. Additionally, poor decision-making surrounding product quality led to an inventory surplus of unsellable devices, which totaled nearly $1 billion. This could have been mitigated by a strong quality management program, as we'll discuss in a moment. One area that BlackBerry did leverage significantly was mergers and acquisitions. They acquired 21 companies to help enhance the current product without the need to develop new innovations completely in-house.
As we well know, BlackBerry, or Research in Motion at the time, was the first mover to market with mobile device featuring email services in 1999. The primary focus here was on businesses and executives to be able to receive email wherever they were. This quickly enhanced to push email and then including a QWERTY keyboard for faster and more efficient typing. Beyond that, security and device management were huge features that continued their advantage. BlackBerry exploded in popularity and became the leader in the smartphone market. Moving ahead, between 1999 and 2007, BlackBerry defined and dominated the smartphone market. With virtually no competition, every new feature or technology advancement was a huge success. While they first began targeting enterprise users, people quickly became addicted to the functionality of their BlackBerry devices, which led to the adoption of devices in the consumer market as well. This is where the term crackberry was coined and quickly spread to describe users' addictions to their devices. We also well know the introduction of the first Apple iPhone in 2007. BlackBerry co-CEOs completely underestimated the launch of the iPhone, which quickly led to the decline of BlackBerry's sales. BlackBerry had a successful first-mover advantage for many years, but others later to the game had advantages as well, such as Apple. As we know, Apple tends to focus on ideas and successes from first movers and strategize how to enhance their product before release to hopefully steal the market. And as we well know now, this certainly worked well for them. BlackBerry also fell behind as they thought it would be too disruptive to change their already established business model and wouldn't be a real game changer anyway. This failure to adapt to consumer needs is what made them lose their competitive advantage from their first mover advantage. Since BlackBerry relies on cellular carriers as resellers for their product, they have the additional supply chain concern of distribution of product through these partners. In terms of technical problems, former Research in Motion co-CEO Jim Balsillie said, "With Storm we tried to do too much. It was a touch display, it was a clickable display, it had new applications, and it was all done in an incredibly short period of time, and it blew up on us." The BlackBerry Storm was targeted to be the iPhone killer. By being too focused on rushing a solution to the market to get back in the game, they again lost sight of their quality and process control. This led to the release of a much anticipated device that ended up being a complete failure with many technical issues. One competitive advantage that BlackBerry still had in 2010 was its reliable network, which, as you can imagine, was a huge value to enterprise and government customers. However, in October 2011, RIM had a 3-day outage, which was the worst that they had ever had, which was due to a lack of focus on strategic planning and infrastructure upgrades to support the high demand on their rapid expansion.
In the early years, BlackBerry used lean manufacturing techniques, with outsourcing manufacturing to the United States, Mexico, Europe, and China. The company was effective in its just-in-time production. With the rapid expansion, they expanded manufacturing to other locations such as Germany, Britain, and more in China and the US. While the expansion in manufacturing locations helped them keep up with the demand, it came with negative effects as well. There were challenges with quality control through a lack of oversight, which resulted in some significant losses over the years. Not only was the lack of quality control an issue, but even when issues arose, they weren't adequately addressed and production continued. This could have easily been improved with a zero defects model. As discussed in the financial section, this led to huge stockpiles of parts that were still manufactured when quality problems were at a high. In some instances, it added up to millions of parts with issues.
Marketing communications are important for companies to keep in touch with customers and let them know what is new on the radar. Developing a strategy is a must for companies to be successful in their communications and how to handle new product launches, both positive and negative press, and customer relations. This helps to know what to do in various situations and how to communicate to various customer types and markets. It is critical to have a plan ahead of time to ensure responses are timely and appropriate. The two co-CEOs were the ones responsible for marketing communications to the public. Looking back, they now know that this certainly was not the best approach, as they focused most of their time on innovation and logistics operations of the company. In fact, it was not until 2008 when the first TV advertisement for BlackBerry even hit the screens. Earlier that year, they had hired their first chief marketing officer, who was Keith Party. When the first iPhone was released, it was far less superior than the BlackBerry at that time, though you likely would not have known that. Apple had done such a great job advertising that the spotlight shifted to them instead of this superior BlackBerry device. This is where things began to change for RIM. When Keith Party was hired, he tried to shift focus from highlighting specific features of devices and focus more on creating an emotional attachment. The co-CEOs did not like most of his or their advertising agency's ideas. As soon as he left the company in early 2011, advertisements returned right back to how they had always had been done before, focusing on solely the technology. Apple's biggest successes were creating marketing strategies around how their devices changed your life. Had the two co-CEOs taken advice from their chief marketing officer or ad agencies that they had hired, maybe things would not have gone so downhill so quickly for them. Another main downfall for RIM was focusing too much only on enterprise and government customers and very little to consumers. That is, until it was too late. Again, this was also due to the fact that the co-CEOs disagreed on who their target market was. While Lazaridis believed that the focus should be on enterprise corporations, Balsillie wanted to shift focus to consumers. If you cannot agree on your target market or customer, you cannot effectively develop a marketing or communication strategy. Everything that you communicate or market varies significantly depending on who the target market is. There was never a big marketing plan to introduce the new phones. In fact, Balsillie's approach was to give away a few hundred devices to lower-level employees and organizations. His hope that they would fall in love with them and bring them into meetings at work where higher-level executives would see their usefulness and adopt them. This plan actually worked. Two large firms, Merrill Lynch and Credit Suisse First Boston, purchased thousands of devices. Although this was seen as a success, without a formal communication marketing strategy, the adoption of the devices remained slow.
BlackBerry had a lot of challenges when it came to developing a sustainable culture. One of their problems was there was no diversity in their workforce. which meant that it was a very top-heavy organization, and many, if not all, the decisions were made at the executive level. But like we have mentioned before, the problem with the chief marketing officer, even at that level, the two CEOs went back to their old ways despite any recommendations. Employees also felt no ownership and job security, especially when Thursdays were known as Pink Slip Thursdays. People would sit around and wait to see if they would even still have a job. Even if the benefits were great, employees still complained on websites like Glassdoor.com that they didn't trust their leaders to take the company in the right direction. As far as failure to empowering employees, BlackBerry has failed to keep their employees engaged and motivated. By not giving the employees a voice, it hinders growth and innovation for the organization. Not being able to share ideas with each other in an open environment can hurt the business tremendously.
We believe that BlackBerry's issues lie with a failure to adapt to changing market conditions. This shift demanded devices which were consumer-driven, lacked the one flagship BlackBerry physical keyboard, and had access to thousands of quality apps which required third-party developers. By not doing this, executives at many companies pushed for devices powered by Apple's iOS and Google's Android operating system, which offered these features. Without a second significant customer base, such as individual consumers, subscriber levels sharply dropped, and we called the company a failure. For BlackBerry to regain market share, they should embrace a consumer-led market and leverage the mature developer network and open source nature of Android while focusing on hardware design that they have extensive success with. Leadership must also make this commitment clear to all employees, using leadership methods and excellent communication. This concludes our presentation on BlackBerry and why it failed as a company. Thank you for your time.